And I'll be handing over to Sue Potter from Spotter Talent. I always love your company name, Sue, it's brilliant. And Sue is going to talk to us about new career paths if you're inside an organisation and you're thinking about perhaps reshaping the workforce, redeploying people, and looking at ways that you might use that levy in order to allow somebody a new career, albeit within their current organisation. So thank you, Sue. Over to you.
Thank you, Amanda. Thank you so much for asking me here. It's an honour and a privilege to be here tonight. Hopefully you can all see my screen. If you can't, then please do let me know. So my name is Sue Potter. I founded Spotter Talent coming up for 2 years ago. My background is 24, 25 plus years in HR, specialising towards the end of my career in apprenticeship programmes and the training development function. My role within Spotter Talent is to support companies as a virtual training manager, but also managing apprenticeship programs. One of my biggest bugbears is when we embrace an apprenticeship program within a company, and then it goes a bit wonky when we haven't got the right resources internally to make that happen and get the mentors and the support structure within the business. So that's what I do for my clients. So tonight, what I would like to talk you through is how to utilise the apprenticeship programme. Now, I absolutely love this picture. It's very simple, it's very basic. It's basically telling us to watch the gap moving in and out of the train, London Underground. However, if we put that into the context of work, do we really know where our gaps are in our workforce, our skills gap? Do we really know who we need to be keeping an eye on, who we need to be training up to make the business sustainable for the future? So I'm going to make an assumption that we do have a rough idea, but while I'm talking through this, can we think about, do you really know where those skills gaps are? Do you really know that one person, or maybe 2 or 3 people within your company, that if they left suddenly or gave you months notice, 3 months notice, would your world potentially stop spinning in the business until you got someone up to their level and up to speed with what they do? Now, I know where I worked before, we've had key people in places, and having a succession plan and knowing your training needs is so, so important. Talking about apprenticeship programs at a skills conference the other month, it was interesting to see that the following question was posed on a poll. Where do you see demand for apprenticeship programs? Now, not surprisingly, the 64% I understand, because the government's obviously doing a lot to push the apprenticeship program for young people. But what concerned me, and I don't know if anyone else is feeling the same, is when you look at the upskilling of whether it be a junior person or whether it be an experienced person, we seem to drop off. Now, that's got me thinking on why. What are we doing with our staff? What are we doing with our experienced hires? Are we thinking, do you know what? Sue doesn't need any more training. She's got oodles of years in this. She's fine. We all still need to keep our skills fresh. Now, apprenticeship programs and the apprenticeship standards are a fantastic way of doing that, which we will look at in a minute. What I want you to think about is, have we become academic snobs? Is the stereotype still there on what an apprentice is and what an apprenticeship program is? I'll give you an example of when I was working in the corporate world. I changed the apprenticeship levy title to the training levy, because a lot of people, I say a lot, a handful of people, were actually quite concerned about going on an apprenticeship. And I was like, but guys, they go right the way up to degrees, they go up to masters, and everyone's like, no, they don't. They do. The apprenticeship programs now are so more advanced than they were way, way back. And I think, sadly, not everyone has moved with that time. So if you are finding within the company, you're struggling a little bit to get the buy-in to look at apprenticeship programs as part of your training strategy, think about changing the language to it's a training levy, not an apprenticeship levy. It may help. It helped me in my other role. So talking about the apprenticeship standards, we've seen them grow in leaps and bounds. And I've just grabbed some different titles because I'm sure we've got a mixed industry sector on tonight's call. So I just wanted to let you know what is out there. So level 2, if you recall, is your basic level, your entry level. This is equivalent to your GCSEs, and they go from anything from finance to, as you can see, bookbinding. They do engineering as well. They do technical ones. There's a whole raft of standards. The level 3 is the advanced one, and that's kind of the more common level that most apprentices will enter into, the Workplace Act. And this is equivalent to your A levels. Here sits nicely all your engineering, so mechanical, electrical, instrumentation, welding, fabrication. But we're now seeing things like procurement and supply. Funeral directors are sitting in there. Now, of late, we've been getting the standards at the level 4s and 5s and 6s and 7s. And these are your degree apprenticeship program, which are fantastic for upskilling your experienced hires. This is what you should be looking at. Certainly at the moment, with budgets probably being reviewed by a lot of companies, training always seems to be one of the first to be cut. But don't panic if it is. Go and look at the standards. Underneath the picture, you will hopefully see the web link of www.institutionforapprenticeships.org/apprenticeship-standards. If you visit that website, it will open up an array of subjects, so whether it be what level, whether it's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7, which industry you're in, which sector you want to look at, and you can then scroll through all the different apprenticeship programs that are out there. So your higher apprenticeship programs, your level 4s are your foundation degrees, looking at more of the HNC levels. And as you can see, you've still got engineering, you've still got your technical in there, but we're now moving into the realms of junior management consultants and a countryside ranger if anyone's looking for one of those. But your 6s and your 7s, these are your bachelors and your masters. So these can be an array of a harbour master. Now, anyone within the marine industry knows harbour masters are very hard to find. So again, that's a little glitch. If we've got a national skill shortage, grow your own. Look at the apprenticeship levy. If you've got someone experienced and that's the route that they want to take, there are options out there for them to do that. Midwifery is on there as well. And I know that you've also got some of the engineering ones too. So what about the cost of all of this? Because it's all very well me saying, yeah, you can do an apprenticeship standard, but what does the money look like? So for those of you that pay the apprenticeship levy, and that's anyone with a payroll bill of over 3 mil for the year, you pay 0.5% per month, which I'm sure you're probably aware of, because for some companies, it's a lot of money on a monthly basis to pay out. And please don't forget, if you are a levy payer, if you are not using it, you will have started losing it, because what the government did after 2 years was, as you were paying in, some of your earlier payments would fall off. So that pool isn't there forever for you. So if you are a levy payer, please look at this to replace some of your budgets if they are being looked at and being cut potentially at the moment. If you are a non-levy payer, you can still tap in to the government funding, and you only pay 5% of what the levy course is. Now, for some of those level 6 and 7s, you're looking at about 11 to 24,000. So if you were looking at a £24,000 course, only paying the 5% is 1,200. So that's a huge saving, rather than having to find the full whack of 24 grand for whether going to university or any other source. So I do urge you to look at the standards. The other thing we're also seeing, a lot of people now don't have the luxury, for whatever reason, to be retiring at 55. So we're seeing a lot of second careerers coming in. So look at what someone is bringing to the company as a whole. Look at their previous experiences, anything that they've done before, from volunteering, what they've done in their pastime, whether they've been a coach for the Little League, whether they're I don't know, a dance teacher in their spare time. And look at that, because you've got people that, if they're volunteering, they've got passion, they've got the drive, they're doing things to help others. So that's the kind of person that you may want to bring into your company, and look at what career aspirations do they now have, because what they were doing, they've either got bored of, or do you know what, they just fancy a change. So the levy is fantastic at doing things like that. Also, don't forget, if you know or you work closely with a company that is a levy payer, they can give you 25% of their levy. Now, there is the stigma that, sorry, not the stigma, the caveat that they have to be a new hire. So you wouldn't be looking to retrain current staff. But if you were looking to bring somebody else in, that is another way of doing so. So I've gone quite quickly, and I am conscious that I do talk quite quickly. So please do feel free to ask me any questions. My experience within the apprenticeship program is 13 years. So if there's anything that you aren't sure of or that you would like me to clarify, please do reach out to me after this session, and I'm more than happy to go through anything with you in more detail. Thank you, Amanda.
Thank you very much, Sue. That was fantastic. And I hadn't realised the 5%, that's all you have to pay as a non-levy payer, which is amazing, absolutely amazing. So thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Okay, I'd like to move on to Mark now. Mark Yates is a careers advisor with years of experience, and he's going to talk to us about how you would set about if you're in a position where you either want or you need to find a new career path, and how you can go about that. Mark, over to you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Well, first off, thank you very much for having me along this afternoon. Hopefully my 15-minute slot will be helpful. The question that I was asked to really look at was, is it possible to change career? Obviously, the answer is going to be yes. So we're going to sort of have a bit of a delve into that in a bit more detail. Sorry, I'm just going to get onto my screen. So, aim for what I'm going to uncover today are why people change career, and it will be multiple reasons, some practical steps that you can take or encourage other people. So, why do people change career? There's probably nothing on this slide that you haven't already worked out or come across in your role already. And certainly as a careers advisor, I will see a whole host of reasons about why people will look to change their career in the future. The boredom one actually does come up a lot more than sometimes is realised. People maybe after having done a career for 5-10 years start to get a bit in need of change or itchy feet and want to move on, or develop new interests in conservation or healthcare, and they want to sort of progress on to something else. So certainly as a careers advisor, I've come across all of those reasons about why people are looking to change. So a huge number of career theories out there about all this. We're obviously not going to touch on them all today, but the two that I thought would be particularly relevant just to touch on today are the DOTS. The DOTS one is all about sort of transition and helping people to plan and move on in their career. It stands for what it says on the screen, but certainly if you're thinking about maybe having a change of career or helping someone else to, there are these 4 elements which are really important to help to look at to help people think through what they're going to move on to. So certainly with decision making, it's really important to help someone or for you to think through how you make decisions. Is it a gut feeling? Do you have to sit down and do a list of pros and cons? How do you make decisions and make sure you make the right one? Opportunity awareness, that's really thinking through about being aware of what the opportunities are. So for instance, if you are really keen to go into something like being a marine biologist, but you live in the Peak District or in central London, then there are less opportunities for marine biology than say if you lived in Brighton or Aberystwyth or on the coast, or off the coast of Australia or something like that. So again, knowing where the opportunities are, knowing what they are and routes into them is going to be really important with planning out about changing a career. So when you're thinking about this, it is really important to do that labour market information search and finding out about the opportunities and where they are. I know the CIPD have got sort of labour market surveys on their site, which are helpful to have a look at. The whole transition skills bit, again, is important to look at and think through how good you are at coping with change, and having that sort of positive mindset of coping with a different set of circumstances and moving from one area into another, which then ties into the self-awareness aspect of how being aware of what your strengths are, what your aptitudes are, and making sure that your aptitudes tie in with the opportunities that you're looking at. And again, that's where things like psychometric testing can come in quite helpful for all that sort of side of things as well. Those 4 elements can sometimes give the impression that actually, if you change career, it has to be a very structured thing, something to plan for, that you need to do every bit needs to be overlaid onto each other and planned, and it takes time to happen and all that sort of thing, which in some instances is true. The other side of the coin there with the theories though is something called happenstance theory, which is all about change happens by unexpected events happening. An example would be I am employed at a university 3 days a week. I wouldn't be there if 6 years ago I hadn't been made redundant by Essex County Council. And actually, for me, that turned out to be a really positive experience because, in honesty, I was pretty bored in the job I was in, but I wasn't going to jump because it was a stable job, and going on to where I work at the moment 3 days a week, it would have meant taking a risk and losing days of earning potential, and it was a big step. But actually getting made redundant, I then had to take the step, and actually I'm in a far more interesting role now with a variety of different jobs, a portfolio career and all that sort of stuff. So those sorts of events happening can, or unexpected events happening can provide people with a whole host of unexpected opportunities. Now that could be, meeting people, talking to people, going to a conference or a training event, and meeting people who you then get to know, who then offer you opportunities and that sort of thing. So that responding to unplanned or unexpected events can be a really good way to change career. And part of all of this is about undertaking things, as Sue was just saying, undertaking things like volunteering and other activities like that, which will open up opportunities to have those unexpected things happen with you or for you. There are a whole host of other career theories out there. There's a very good, which we're not going to go through now, but there's a very good careers websites, the New Zealand Career Service website. There's loads of really good information there about them if you want to have a bit more of a look at them. So moving on, we've got 2 slides about some practical steps of what to do about change of career. So first off really is about identifying what motivates you and what you're aspiring to. We all know that people's motivations and aspirations will change over time as they get older, as the life experiences change them. So again, identifying what motivates you or what your aspirations are, is going to be a key factor here. That may sound obvious, but it's a key stepping stone. The next one, again, is all about trying to identify some baby steps that you can take that will help with a radical change. That could be volunteering, or start doing some blogging, or doing some further training, doing things like an OU part-time degree, or some other evening classes that will help reskill you in the direction that you want to go to, will be a really good way to start to make that change. The next point about making the irrelevant transferable, you will all have come across people who have applied for things maybe where you work, who've hopefully made really good use of a past experience to demonstrate that actually they've got some really good transferable skills. So for instance, making good use of an engineering background when applying for a legal job. It is possible for things like patent agents and that sort of thing, or those sorts of areas. So it's about looking at your past history, what you've achieved, and looking at how that could be transferable later on. One of the best UCAS forms, personal statements I ever saw, was an equine student who was applying for a psychology degree, and actually she made it the most normal and natural thing to seem to want to jump from an equine degree onto doing a human psychology degree, because it was all talking about the psychology of riding and interactions between a horse and a rider, and how to use sort of psychology to get better performance from both. So it is possible, and it's really looking at how different past experiences will be very transferable. As I mentioned, aptitudes and personality testing can be useful, but only really as part of an advice package. They're good on their own, but actually to get the most value from a career change point of view, getting some advice alongside it would be really useful. And the last point on this slide really is about finding the golden thread. I guess by that I mean trying to find the story, the narrative, the building up of a backstory of why you're applying to change tack, to change direction, so that when the HR professional or manager gets your application for a change of direction, they can, you have made that, join the dots up for the last X amount of years to show that actually the next step that you're applying for is the most obvious, it makes the most sense, it draws in all these different things that makes that the application of what you're applying for really resonate as being the next most natural, normal step to take on your career journey. So hopefully all that makes sense. So again, some practical tips. So doing some research, if you know you want to get into, for instance, midwifery, which is, I know Sue mentioned that earlier, you'll find that actually there are degree apprenticeship routes in, but there's also the traditional route of doing a 3-year degree at university. So, you know, find out the routes into where you want to go to. Find out what their career actually involves and how it might be different in different settings. So as a midwife, you're going to be working in the community, in a hospital. You may be working with under 16-year-olds or older parents, all that sort of stuff. So again, find out what it actually involves more than what you might, it may well have things in there which you hadn't expected. And again, networking is a horrible phrase, but we all do it, hopefully. So find out who you know or who people that you know, or a virtual coffee, talk through their role, what they do, use all the socials. You know, Twitter is good for all sorts of different occupation areas to find out what the current issues are, and it's a really good way to get a good flavour of what industries actually involve. If people are looking for more design careers, Instagram's a brilliant way to build up a portfolio of evidence as well, and to find out what other what else is happening, trends and all that sort of stuff. So very much sort of look at building those networks to help you develop. And in all honesty, one needs to also look at what the barriers might be. And the financial barriers, is there a potential barrier of not having studied for 15 years? Is that scary? How could you address that? Could you do something to help you get used to, you know, critically analysing texts and all that sort of stuff again? So getting some, find out what the barriers are and creatively trying to think around routes around those barriers would be really useful. And planning and preparing are going to be really, really important. Talking to someone impartial, and by that I mean, you know, obviously your best mate, your partner, child, you know, will all have an opinion. They'll all want you to be successful. But I guess the issue is talking to someone who's impartial, who maybe can take a step back from help you take a step back from your situation and look at broader issues, and who can help you think about those barriers and how to address them, or might be able to come up with some other equally good ideas that might be easier to get into or alternatives to. One example would be, quite often I've seen people who want to get jobs in teaching, and they think that just means just working in a primary school or secondary school. And actually, there's a whole host of the teaching roles, from working in prisons, hospitals, outreach settings, charities, city farms, all that sort of thing. So talking to someone who's a bit more impartial can help you think through the range of opportunities that could actually lead on to. I've given quite a few links here of source of information. So National Career Service prospects and targets have got some really good careers information on them, which will be useful to have a look at. Things like the prospects website have got a quick careers quiz that you can take. If anyone here is interested in the NHS careers website has got there's about 350 careers on there, and a careers quiz as well. The CDI is the Careers Development Institute. It's the national body for careers advisors. They have a professional register, so if anyone's looking for careers advisors, then there will be a list of people who are giving advice. So there's a couple of different places there to have a look at. And finally, me, as you can see, I do a whole load of things, and they've got websites and all that sort of stuff as well. So really, that's my bit covered. Hopefully that has been useful. And again, at any point, do come back and ask me questions.
That's great. Thank you very much indeed, Mark. Some really useful tips there. And I think especially around sort of make sure you play to your strengths, thinking about volunteering opportunities, shadowing people, sampling in some way a potential new career before you actually take the leap. Make sure you know what you're leaping into, as it were. And the network map was fantastic. That's just the sort of thing we all ought to be doing anyway, to see how we might get those segues through. So a friend of mine was in marketing, and she decided with 2 young children, she would retrain as a radiographer at the local hospital, and is thoroughly enjoying a completely different career, which gives me a nice introduction to our next speaker, with Pete Bowery, who has done something similar in terms of changing his career. So Pete's now going to take over and talk us through how he did that. Over to you, Pete.
Marvellous. Thanks, Amanda. And these are some stepping stones at a river in Derbyshire. And last summer, I was on a hiking holiday with some friends. We were on a 60-mile hike. And the first day started really well for the first couple of miles until we got to these stepping stones that we had to cross. And the river was running at least 6 inches over the top of them, and they were impassable. But we had no choice. We had to carry on. Our hotel was 10 miles on the other side of the river, and we were hungry by this point as well. So we had to find another way around. And about 1.5 years ago, after 20 years working in retail operations for a national retailer, I had to do exactly the same in my career. Our company had gone into administration for the second time in 5 years, and you don't have to look very far to find out that retail is quite challenging. Now, I'd wanted to go into human resources for a long time. I'd seen the difference it could make to companies and to people. And the job that I had in retail management involved a lot of human resources aspects. So after 20 years in retail, faced with a changing landscape, I decided that it was time for me to step out onto my stepping stones. So this is how I did it. First of all, I had to decide on the direction that I was going to take. And picking up on some of Mark's points, I did an awful lot of research. I talked to people that I knew in our human resources department. I talked to my cousin, who's a HR manager, and I researched an awful lot of job roles so that I knew what exactly I was going to be letting myself in for. Importantly, I talked it through with my wife as well, because such a big change I didn't want to make on my own. And it turned out that when we got into step 2, embarking on the journey, My options included the one that I took, which was actually to take a year out of paid employment to do a master's in HR and to get my CIPD level 7 qualification. So I applied for the master's, I got on the master's, I handed my job in at my established role, and at this point there was no turning back. I had to step out onto my third stepping stone, which was finding a mentor. And I cannot recommend this highly enough. It was absolutely superb. This was someone who I didn't know, apart from being a mentor, who could critique me, who I could bounce ideas around with, who would challenge me, who would push me in the right direction, and importantly, someone who would tell me where I was going wrong and what gaps I had that I needed to fill. Absolutely invaluable, and I'm still in touch with that person 18 months later. Fourth step for me was to get involved with as much as I could. It wasn't enough to get onto back to university and get the qualification I was looking for. A lot of people know that it simply is not enough to have the qualifications on the CV. So I chose to get involved. I went to the Guildhall School of Business and Law in London, and they needed a course representative to help develop the course. So I volunteered. I ended up working with several lecturers and senior lecturers at the university to overhaul and to develop the course. That meant that I got to know an awful lot of the lecturers and staff at the university that I now work at. Another part of getting involved was joining the CIPD and going to branch events, and yes, the dreaded word networking. That I dislike. I struggle. Walking into a room of 60 people you don't know is daunting at the best of times. But through getting involved, I then met Amanda, who invited me to join the CIPD branch, and I'm now contributing through that as well. My next opportunity to get involved came when I was doing my dissertation, and the HR department at university needed some help on their gender pay gap report. So I said, yes, I'll do that. I'm doing the dissertation, but I'm sure I can fit this in. And I did the entire university's gender pay gap report for the HR director, who then later on spotted my fifth step, finding your niche. And he picked up on the fact that I was good with numbers. I had a business background, that I could put things together. I had the human resource qualification, and he then eventually offered me the job that I've got now, which aligns those skills. It aligns the human resource experience and qualification and knowledge that I've got with the business acumen from the previous 20 years business experience I've got with the numeracy. And I'm now lucky enough to work for the university on a range of HR projects and people metrics, the most recent one of which involved me working with the finance director and the HR director together. So it's been a fascinating journey. I've really loved it. And I don't think that I'm at my destination yet. I think I've simply crossed to the other side of the river. There's another 20 years work ahead, and I plan to take all the opportunities that come my way as well. It's been hard work, but it has been one of the best things that I have ever done. So thank you for listening.
No, that was a lovely story. Thank you, Pete, because it's quite, well, not quite, it's very motivational and engaging to hear about other people's journeys so that you know that your own is possible too. Which leads me on nicely to our last speaker. Last but not least is Jennifer Livings, who is an HR professional, but is going to talk about that switch between corporate life to being self-employed and running your own business. Over to you, Jen.
Thank you, Amanda. So I took the jump back in 2019, and set up Silk Helix. I failed to follow a lot of the advice that's come on today about planning and everything before you make the jump, and I just did it suddenly, and I've learnt a lot in the last 18 months since I started that business. The big thing being that when I started my own, and I thought I needed to build my confidence as a HR consultant, and I've been doing that for 10 years. And actually what I've learned in running a business is that it's a completely different skill to being a HR consultant, to doing HR, being in internal HR. It's about selling your services, it's about marketing. So that's been my biggest thing that I've learned throughout the last year. And I think for anyone that wants to take that jump into self-employment, firstly, it's about making those decisions about what you want to do. There's lots of ways to do it. There's the opportunities around going freelance, taking on contracts. I've decided that I wanted to build a business, build a brand that I can grow and eventually start employing people. But of course, there's a lot of people that do take the self-employed option and don't go for that and go for kind of contracts. There's a lot of contract work out there at the moment. It was scary. It's flexible. It's great. I love it. I'm learning all the time. It's hard work, but it's not work all the time. My absolute top tip for kind of starting it and is just to soak everything up. And actually going back to what Mark said about going out to networks, using social media, just being out there, tapping into everything that's available. And all these resources are available to be able to kind of set up and start up on your own. So this big thing I've been sort of looking at in last year and finding as I grow the business. Obviously, growing a business in a lockdown has been a huge challenge, and certainly had to learn everything around kind of the marketing through that. But that, for me, it's been a great opportunity. Looking at kind of what Pete says there around kind of finding mentors is brilliant for sort of starting your own business, looking actually out of those skills that we don't get when we're in HR, that we don't build up. And looking at sort of taking on board probably multiple mentors actually when you're building skills in different areas that you've perhaps not been involved in before. Putting yourself out there, networking, as others have said, walking into a room and just being able to speak to people, a huge challenge for me, not something I'm comfortable with, but something that I've had to do and had to get used to. And of course now that's all online, and changed it again this year in the way that we do things. And actually, I've got to a point where I'm looking forward to going back out there, being live and talking to people again. But getting your personal brand out there as well, and being sort of social media gives us so many opportunities in terms of growing. And because HR is an industry where for many businesses, they will cut back, they will kind of look at outsourcing in terms of saving costs when we're heading into a recession. So it's a really great opportunity for those of us in to be able to offer those kind of services to companies that are too small to have their own HR departments. So yeah, so that's kind of me really. It's, for me, as I say, it was just a jump and learn as I go along in terms of building the business over the last year. But I'm on LinkedIn and answer any questions. If you want to put any to me, then give me a shout.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much, Jennifer. Well, if people would like to start to put their questions in the chat box, then we will take those. That's been a really interesting session. Thank you. The first question coming up here is, what would be the best pathway to find a mentor? So Pete, I think we've got to give a plug, haven't we, to our new scheme. Would you like to tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, well, good news is that Amanda and I are actually working on setting up a member-to-member mentoring scheme for our Essex and Ipswich CIPD branch. There are a few posts which have gone into our LinkedIn and Facebook groups, and it will be going live in January, and we should have mentors and mentees set up in February. So that's a great one for anyone in the human resources sector. And just to let you know, we'll be looking for people who would like to be mentored, but importantly for people who would like to mentor as well. And it's an incredibly fruitful thing to invest in somebody, and it's really beneficial for your personal development to help coach, manage and develop people as well. So watch this space.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. And the other thing to say is, if you're thinking about a mentor in a different way, so it's not necessarily HR based, you maybe want a different kind of mentor. So let's say you want to develop your commercial awareness skills. Think again about that network that you have. Think about people that you know in work, outside of work, friends, family connections, and almost scope out that map for yourself and think about, who do I know that I think is really good at whatever it is I want to develop in myself, whatever those skills are. learn from the best, then approach those people and ask them, you know, you seem to do such and such really well. I'd love to be better at that. Could you maybe give me 20 minutes of your time, maybe meet up, coffee, virtually or otherwise? I'd love to hear how you've developed your skills, because that's something I'm really looking to do myself. People will always be flattered to ask, and the very worst thing they can say is no, but it's unlikely that they will. It will just be more about finding a time that suits you both. You don't have to label it mentoring. It's just, you know, sharing information and advice, but it does the same thing for you. So do think, whatever kind of skill you want to acquire, always think about who you might approach to help you as one of the steps along the way. Okay, great. Have we got any more questions? Let's have a look. Let's see, we've got some links on there. Jennifer's put her links on LinkedIn. I think myself and Pete can also be found on LinkedIn. So if you want to connect with us, do please do so. Sue spoke about looking for skills, areas to focus on, and Giles has put an IBM paper link in the chat box for us. Thank you very much for that, Giles. That's fantastic. Any other questions or perhaps points that our speakers would like to make? Anything anybody can think of?
I suppose it's just really that being active and trying things and saying yes to things is often a really good way just to build, you know, who you know, and to build experience. And even if you are saying yes to things that you don't really think will take you in a particular direction, it, you know, just being open to trying new things can be a really good way to develop within HR or in different directions, I think.
It's really important, isn't it, to think about your transferable skills and then be quite open-minded about approaching different people to find out. A bit like with youngsters when they're leaving school or university, it's almost as important to know what you don't want as to find out what you do want. So none of that activity is ever a waste of time, because it's all giving you important information about where you think you fit in, what you think you might like to do, not like to do, and so on. So yeah, absolutely, I agree very much, Mark. And Giles has shared some other links on strengths and a strengths-based career. And certainly when you do look at research on how successful people build their careers, it will be that they're based on their strengths. So knowing what your strengths are, what your energizing strengths are, is really critical, actually, when you think about new careers and how you might take yourself forward. Because if the new role, whatever it is, has the opportunity to allow you to use those energizing strengths, it's much easier for you to shine. And those strengths will be different to somebody else with the same technical skill set, because that's what makes us more unique. So strengths is a very vital thing to look at. Anybody else like to comment?
Sorry to jump in. I also think it's really key that if you do go for what you think is your dream job and it isn't, it's okay to leave. There is not that sometimes it's deemed as, oh, it's a failure because you only were there for however many weeks or months. It's not. If it's not right for you, it's not right for you. Don't, it's like putting a square peg in a round hole. Don't stay there thinking it will get better. If your gut feeling is it's not energizing you and it's not right for you, then look for something else and use that as a learning, like big tick, that's not what I want to do. That really isn't for me. So take that on as a learning. Don't ever think, oh, I failed, I didn't do the interview, you know, I didn't pick up on anything. Just learn from it and move on, because there is something out there. And as everyone's been saying, you've really got to love what you do, because we're working for a long time, and there's nothing to say what you choose now is where you have to stay for the rest of your career.
Absolutely, yes. And sometimes, I mean, there is that talk, isn't there, about in psychology terms, as we become more mature adults, we start to want to move away from some of the core things we've enjoyed and done well, almost as if we want to develop other muscles, as it were, want to develop another part of ourselves. And that's a brilliant opening then for a second career, isn't it? Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Right, Sue spoke about levy paying and non-levy paying organisations regarding apprenticeships. Can you tell me a bit more about this, please? Is there certain criteria?
Yes, if you have an annual payroll of 3 million or above, the HMRC will basically be tapping on your shoulder saying you owe us 0.5% that you pay monthly via an electronic system, which goes into what they call the levy fund, the levy pot. If you are under that, you still sign up for the online system these days, and you can tap into the 5% offering that's there. But the criteria is the 3 mil salary for the year.
Right, okay, that's lovely. Similar question that might be a good one for you, Sue. Serena's saying, I work in an IT services company and we're looking to reskill certain members. Just wanting to know what providers and sites could help with this.
On my presentation, I don't think I've still got it on my webpage. No, on my presentation is the link to the Apprenticeship Standards website.
Mm-hmm.
If you go onto there, they will actually, if you give me 2 seconds, I can see if I can pull it up.
Yeah,
but
sure.
if you search on a standard, it will then give you an option to search for training providers. Let me just see. Let me just see if I can. Apprenticeship standards. My IT skills are probably going to be shockingly bad in front of the HR profession, so please bear with me while I do this. It's a very simple website to use if I can find it. Law of Sod, here we go. Institute of Apprenticeship Programs. Apprenticeships, right, is it all right if I share? Sorry, everybody.
Yes, please do.
It's all about apprenticeships, in case you hadn't gathered. Right, hopefully, can you see my screen that's got the allocating a fund band, the apprenticeship one? If you go to the top here on apprenticeship standards, it will pull down, or should pull down, all the options that you've got. So as you will see on the left-hand side, it's got your sector, your route, and towards the bottom, it will say which level of apprenticeship program you would like to look at. If, for example, we just pick the first one, it will then take you, that one hasn't been approved yet, not the best option. Let me go to one that has. Oh, it has got approved, but it had a warning. Let's go down to this one. Oh, we've all got the warning. I'll ignore that. So if you go down to here on the right-hand side, you can see the print the standards, find an endpoint assessor, what you need to do for applying, and you can usually around here find a provider. So find an apprenticeship. So you can put in your postcode, and this will tell you who is near you that can do the training. It will then also explain if it's going to be on-site, which is when it's predominantly at your workplace, if it's off-site, predominantly at the college or university, or if it's a mix. And sometimes they'll do it, now obviously virtual as well. So it will give you all of these options. But this page is in my presentation, which I think, Amanda, is that being sent out?
Well, the recording will be in about a day's time. So this will show your slides as well as us speaking.
But if you could just copy the link, Sue, and put it in the chat, I'll
that is exactly my love. I'm just quickly doing that. Let me quickly go in there now.
Thank you.
There you go. That one should work.
Thanks. Because our company is an apprentice. We are a levy payer.
Yeah.
And we have utilised the funds and so forth. And there's a company we use called QA Apprenticeships.
Yeah.
Seeing if there were any alternative options, just because with these certain members, especially the field service engineers, with COVID, we've had to obviously furlough a great deal of them. And some of them have had to have redundancies because it's an area that's not of need at the moment. So that's why the topic of interest is just saying, what can we do to reskill them so they could hopefully apply to other areas of the business. So this would be a good starting tool, just to let the managers know that the standards will guide them to letting them know who to use and so forth. So thank you for that.
No, that's fine. And Sue has also saved another search engine for you as well. I would always recommend, even if you've got a normal provider, always stick your head above the parapet and just see what else is around there.
Yeah.
Because it keeps any training providers, forgive me, it keeps them on their toes. We can all get complacent, and it's about finding the best provider that suits the business needs. And sometimes that is actually going slightly further afield than you would normally want to. But because of now all the technology, and certainly if they're coming to do all the assessments in your workplace, mean that the apprentice has to travel. So I would always challenge the norm. When I was in corporate, I was a bit of a minx. I would always look at different training providers every year when we were bringing on an apprentice. Even if it was the same apprenticeship program that we had used previously, I would still challenge the norm to see if there was a better provider, because the better providers give a better apprenticeship program, which means a better experience for the learner. And at the end of the day, that's what it's about.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for that. I really appreciate that.
No, my pleasure. Feel free to link in with me, or you know, give me any other questions. That's not a problem at all.
Definitely will. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, well, we've got a few minutes left. If there are any other questions anybody would like to ask. Don't see anything coming through. Okay, well, in that case, I'd love to say thank you to our speakers, Sue Potter, Jennifer Livings, Pete Bowery and Mark Yates. Thank you for giving your time and great input today. It's been really useful. So thank you very much, everybody, and have a good evening and stay safe. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye, everyone.